coming on the air with news we wish we never had to report. Yet another school shooting, this time out of Michigan, where 3 students are dead, 6 other people hurt after a teenager opened fire at his high school less than an hour from Detroit. And we're still getting information in as we speak. In fact, right now, there's an update from the sheriff that is happening. We're going to bring you those details with our team live. We're also live with that new travel warning on Omicron, with the WHO now saying people over 60 should stay home, don't go overseas, as the government here at home looks to get a handle on that new COVID strain. And now, just as we were coming on the air, an FDA panel approving the first antiviral pill. Plus, why the Fed chair's COVID comments, along with what he said on inflation, are putting the markets on a roller coaster ride. We'll also take you out to Minnesota, where a jury is being seated right now in the case of Kim Potter. She was a cop, remember, when she shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright, and says she thought her gun was a taser when she did it. And a college student dead after a hit to the head during a fraternity boxing match. Tonight's original looks at the new questions about safety and the pressure to maybe even get rid of Greek life on campus. Plus, you've seen him on TV. Now he wants you to see him in the Senate. Dr. Oz running for next year's open seat in Pennsylvania. We'll talk about why that's adding a new dimension to one of the most wide open, high-profile races in the country. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we're starting tonight's show in Michigan, where 3 students left for school this morning, but will not come home. Killed after a classmate, a sophomore, apparently shot them with a semi-automatic handgun, we're just learning, and shot several other students and a teacher at a high school near Detroit today, according to police. You're going to see in a second what it looked like from a chopper that headed to Oxford High School, where more than 100 calls for help came in around 1 o'clock today. The shooter himself is in custody. He's believed to be 15 years old. President Biden was briefed about the whole thing and just spoke about it. Watch.
My heart goes out to the families enduring the unimaginable grief of losing a loved one.
Michigan's governor also echoing what you just heard from the president there, saying, my heart is with the parents who had their children taken from them today and with the entire community in Oxford. I want to go right to Maura Barrett with the details on this. And Maura, I mean, simultaneously to this broadcast being on, we're getting an update from the sheriff's office. And it sounds like, and I think we heard from the governor as well, no motive yet that they know of, right?
Right, Hallie, it doesn't look like there's been any indication from the shooter himself, and he has invoked his right not to speak and asking for a lawyer once he was brought into custody. And all of this happened incredibly quickly. It was around 1 p.m. this afternoon, and like you said, more than 100 911 calls coming into dispatch, and police saying they were able to arrest the shooter within 5 minutes of the first shots happening. And based on evidence that they found inside the school, it seems like he fired off at least 15 to 20 shots. Obviously, as you mentioned, 3 students now dead, 6 more people injured. One of those people, a teacher, and all 6 of those people have been transported to area hospitals. Hallie.
We understand, too, from the sheriff's office just now that the suspect is not cooperating, the shooter in custody, but they say not giving them information that could be useful. He was apparently in class when this happened. Do we know anything else about the condition of the victims who were not killed, more about the ones who were hurt, who were injured, who were then obviously taken away to be treated?
Right, we do know that the response here was really large, Hallie. It's a small suburb, but police, fire, SWAT teams were all brought in, and so there was about 60 ambulances on site and helicopters as well, and so they were able to transport those victims quickly to area hospitals, and we're expecting to get an update on their injuries, hopefully in this press conference that is about to start here. And we do know that within the last couple of hours, since the last press conference, police have been conducting a secondary search of the high school to make sure that no other victims have been left behind. But as for details specifically about the students and the teacher that are injured, we don't have those updates yet. And we don't also know whether or not the student, the shooter, the suspect who is being questioned right now was targeting any sort of specific classroom or teacher. And so these are all still details that we're hoping to get more clarity on coming up. And I know
because you're sitting here talking with me on air right now, Maura, that you're not watching our air, but we're seeing the governor, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. She is live right now on the left side of our screen as this news conference has begun. And to your point, Maura, we just heard they still don't know that question about whether this was targeted or random or why this happened. Those are questions that will be revealed as this investigation moves forward. You look at this community, Maura, and from my understanding from talking with our teams who have been covering this, I spoke with one senator from Michigan. This is a pretty tight-knit community, right?
It absolutely is. And it's a small suburban community just north of Detroit, about 45 minutes away from this city, that we're preparing for their holiday season, right? I mean, it's just about the beginning of December. We just wrapped up Thanksgiving. And so students coming back to class this week, definitely, as far as we know, not something that was expected to happen in this community. But what I will say is that the police have said is that the response to this was just so quick and executed so well that they're hoping that helped in the sense of saving more people's lives and hopefully preventing injury. I think we might have a soundbite from the sheriff during his press conference earlier about how quickly everything was executed, if you want to take a listen.
There was an orderly evacuation. The school did everything right. Everybody remained in place. They barricaded themselves. And Tim here has done a great job in terms of preparing. You never want to prepare for something like this, but you have to.
And Maura, I understand too, again, as we're having this sort of split screen moment where we're keeping an ear on that news conference that is happening live as we speak, that the number of people hurt, the number of people shot who lived is 8. We thought it was 6. It turns out there are 2 additional people who were shot and hurt in this incident, in addition, of course, to those 3 students who were killed, and just this devastating news coming out of this community in Michigan. Maura, I'm going to ask you to stay close to your camera because I want you to go back and continue to listen to this news conference. If we get any other further information that is pertinent here, Maura, we're going to come back to you if we learn anything new, okay?
Absolutely, will do.
Thanks, friend. We've been talking a lot about the other big headline of the day, that new COVID variant, right? Omicron. And there's now a new warning from the World Health Organization saying people older than 60 and people with underlying conditions should hold off on traveling overseas, with the White House trying to buy some time before that variant spreads here and figure out how to fight it. Experts say it could take 3 months, maybe, for a vaccine tweaked specifically for Omicron to get approved. And then right as we were coming on the air, like literally as I was standing out there delivering our open here, an FDA panel voted to recommend another tool to fight COVID, this antiviral pill from Merck. All right, so why is Omicron getting so much attention? Check out this 3D rendering here. You can see Omicron versus Delta. Omicron's the one on the right. And all those little red dots, those are mutations, basically, spike mutations. It has way more of them than Delta does. That doesn't necessarily mean it's more dangerous. Scientists don't know that yet, but they're studying this. It's going to take them a little longer to figure that out. The U.S. doesn't have any confirmed cases yet, but experts think Omicron is probably already here. Several countries across Europe and Africa already have cases. So does Canada. Japan just confirmed its first case today. And then there's that Merck pill we mentioned. It's designed to treat adults who already show symptoms of COVID and who are at risk of going to the hospital. This will be the first approved antiviral pill to treat the disease. And again, that FDA panel recommending it. But there's a few catches to that, including the fact that if you're pregnant, you're not supposed to take it. Gabe Gutierrez is here to talk about all this for us. Gabe, it's good to see you. And can we start with this new travel advisory? Because we talked about how the WHO only, even up to this point, has said we don't support these restrictive targeted travel bans. Also is now recommending, hey, if you're over 60, if you're immunocompromised, you shouldn't travel internationally right now.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second, Hallie, but actually I was just listening in my other ear to this FDA advisory panel. They're going over the reasons why they voted the way they did. I'll get to that in a second. First, I want to talk about what you were saying, yes, and the World Health Organization essentially advising, people age 60 and over, people with comorbidities like heart disease, cancer, not to travel. This is not shared, apparently, by U.S. officials, of course. It doesn't look like they're going to put out any guidance, changing that. Dr. Fauci, was asked today on MSNBC, should Americans change their travel plans? And he said no, that they should not change their holiday plans, rather, but, that they should continue to monitor this. But certainly, yes, the WHO monitoring this and urging, older people around the world to really consider and even postpone their travel. But, Hallie, I want to switch to what you just
let me go to that FDA panel. I feel like I started in the wrong place with you, Gabe. I didn't realize you had an ear on this panel. Talk me through it. So they've recommended this pill now, right?
Yeah, there's always seems to be breaking news during your hour, Hallie, but this happened just a few moments ago, as you said, going right into your show. This panel voted 13 to 10. 13 to 10, so really not clear-cut at all.
That's interesting.
And as you know, Hallie, these FDA advisory panels, they make a recommendation, and then this goes to the full FDA. The FDA does not have to follow the recommendation of this panel, but they typically do. That could happen in a couple days. We're not quite sure. But I want to tell you what I was listening to. Literally, as you were on the air, they were going doctor by doctor and researcher to really discuss the reasons why they voted the way they did. So again, 13-10, this advisory panel voted in favor of authorizing this antiviral pill. On the yes side, the people that did so said, look, they believe the results of the clinical trial. There were some issues, though, as you may recall. Initially, they thought that this pill reduced the risk of hospitalization and death by 50%. New data came out on Friday saying it was only 30%. But the people that voted yes here, the doctors that voted yes, said that in their view, the benefits outweigh the risk. Now,
so basically, wait, sorry, Gabe, just so I can put, I'm trying to translate this into my plain English thing. They're basically saying that even 30% effective is better than having nothing at all, essentially.
Exactly, and they say this is very promising. They do say, though, as you mentioned, that they really want this for high-risk populations. And they don't, at this point, think that pregnant women should use this. Now, that kind of leads me to the no's here. Again, 10 of the folks on the advisory panel voted no. And, that's pretty high, considering this was by no means unanimous. It was almost split. The folks that wanted no that voted no said that they thought that this antiviral pill, at this stage, they weren't satisfied with the risk of the mutations. They think that it's possible, and of course, more study is needed, but they wanted to see more evidence that this pill would not trigger mutations in the virus, or, in people that took them. Yeah. And they also say that, they weren't fully satisfied that something like birth defects was not adequately addressed in this evidence so far. And there was debate today during this advisory panel about, could this trigger even cancer in some people that may take this pill? Again, this is all just worst case scenarios that some of these doctors are talking about. But essentially, they were not satisfied with the evidence so far. But again, Hallie, the bottom line is at this point, this FDA advisory panel did recommend the full FDA to not approve, but to authorize for emergency use this pill.
Gabe, I'm really glad to have you on because I know you're monitoring every single thing that's happening as it relates to this. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you, my friend. We'll see you tonight on NBC Nightly News. Appreciate you being on with us. As Gabe just talked about, there's the health effects of this Omicron variant, but then there's the economic effects, right? And we saw the markets take a dive today after the Fed chair warned if this new strain freaks people out too much from going to work in person, that could have a ripple effect. Here's some of what he told Congress.
The recent rise in COVID-19 cases and the emergence of the Omicron variant pose downside risks to the employment and economic activity and increased uncertainty for inflation.
Stephanie Rule is here to help us sort through all of this as we look at the Dow dropping something like 650 points today. Steph, okay. You are so good at translating Jerome Powell speak into English, so do that for us here. And then also talk about, listen, some of this is Omicron, but some of it is also inflation too, right?
A lot of it is inflation. Yeah. The real takeaway from Jerome Powell speaking today really was the pivot we heard. Until now, they've really been talking about inflation as it relates to COVID. It's tied to COVID, which it is. But the administration and the Fed have always been saying it's transitory, it's short term. This was the first time we heard Fed Chair Powell say, let's stop using the word transitory. And while the new variant is an issue, remember, when the Delta variant emerged last summer, you saw the economic recovery start to slow down. We traveled less. We went out less. We then got through it. So they're monitoring the new variant. It's obviously impacting travel, hotel stocks. We saw that Friday. We're seeing it again. But the real thing is, what is the Fed going to do about inflation? And most likely, they're going to start tapering off all the easy monetary policy. There's been a huge amount of government support, the Fed helping markets. They're now going to pull away because the economic recovery is so hot that's driving prices even higher. So the stock market goes down because that means we're likely going to see interest rates go up sooner. Now, don't panic. I know people are going, oh my gosh, interest rates
right. What does it mean for my mortgage? What does it mean for it? Right.
Okay, yes. But interest rates have been extraordinarily low for a very long time. And I would bet you have already refinanced your mortgage. So have I. So have most people out there. And one way to curb this hot real estate market would be if rates weren't so low. And remember, the last time inflation was where it is today, rates were above 5%. We're currently at 0%. So if we got to 1 or 2, we would still be in very safe territory. In fact, it would show that the economy is strong, working independently on its own.
Can I go back to one thing as it relates to Omicron? Because I take your point,
Yes.
Steph, and it's a good one. Like, that's not the whole reason. It's not even the biggest reason why the market's kind of freaked out, and have been freaking out the last few days. But you talked about the impact of the new variant potentially, right, on things like travel stocks, hospitality stocks, et cetera. But what about on the labor force? Because that seemed to be an important part of Powell's warning, too, basically saying, listen, people might get really nervous about this thing, and that could affect the labor force.
Yes, it could. That's definitely a risk. But we're getting the jobs report this Friday, and you're going to see more and more people went back to work. The jobs report won't have factored in the new emergence of this variant. And when you think about person-to-person contact jobs, a lot of lower-wage jobs that people already weren't enthusiastic to go back to, this could reinforce that concern, and people would say, I'm not sure, but we'll see. Remember, we're going to be living with COVID in new variants for quite some time, and for those who suffer the most, it's the unvaccinated, and a lot of people have got vaccinated, and the vaccine mandates do work, and the overwhelming message, whether it's from business leaders or health leaders right now, you want the economy open? Get vaccinated.
Steph Rule, great to have you on. I appreciate you pulling out your Jerome Powell English Dictionary.
Congratulations.
Always. Thank you, friend. Come back soon. We want to take you out of a courthouse in Hennepin County, Minnesota. 3 jurors have been picked so far in this yet another high-stakes trial, right? That's part of this national conversation we've been having about race and policing. The defendant is named Kim Potter. She's a former police officer who shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright last April. Do you remember this? This was during a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. We're going to show the body cam video of what happened because she thought she was pulling her taser when she actually pulled her gun. We have to warn you before we show this that a lot of people are going to find this video disturbing. Potter is charged with first and second-degree manslaughter, and we should note that her defense attorney has said she is expected to take the stand in her own defense, which is an interesting strategic decision here. To talk about it, I want to bring in Ron Allen, who is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for us. So, Ron, let me start with the jury selection piece of this, right? We know, I believe, as at least 20 minutes ago as I was coming on set here, 3 jurors have been picked so far. What do we know about them?
We know very little. The jury is going to be anonymous. They're going to be partially sequestered during the process and totally sequestered when they go into deliberations. We know that there are 2 men and 1 woman. One of the men works at a Target store as an overnight manager of some sort. The woman is a retired special education teacher. And we only know that by listening to the questioning that has been done by the judge and by the defense and prosecution, trying to determine their views on issues like policing, race, on the defendant, on the victim, Dante Wright, on the protest that happened after the incident happened back in April. So it's a very slow, methodical process. The judge thinks it'll take about a week to get to 12 jurors and 2 alternates.
What do we know? She says, right, Kim Potter says that Dante Wright was resisting arrest, basically. But she's facing a series of charges here. Can you walk through what those are and why they're significant?
Well, the most significant charge is manslaughter because she killed Dante Wright allegedly by shooting him with her service revolver. Her lawyers and others have claimed that she essentially mistook one weapon for the other. And when this initially happened, the police chief at the time said that he thought it was an accident. So they've used the words accident and mistake to describe what happened. The Wright family and their attorneys totally reject that. They think that she has to accept responsibility because of what happened. Remember, she was an officer who had some 26 years of experience. And the day this happened, she was out with an officer, a younger officer, who she was training. And the Wright family and their attorneys point out that there's a big difference between a gun, a 9mm Glock, I believe it was, and a taser. And the officers are trained one is on one side, the other is on the other. The weapon is on the right-hand side, the taser on the left hand, the less dominant side. So they are saying that this is not an accident. This is not just a mistake, that there is criminal responsibility that she has to accept for this. And if she is charged with manslaughter, first-degree manslaughter, it's 15 years in prison. Second degree, 10. But they want that conviction, the family does. They wanted a murder charge. They didn't get that. But that's where we are. The most serious charge is first-degree manslaughter. Hallie?
Ron Allen, live for us there. Ron, thank you so much for that. And by the way, as Ron was delivering his live report, we learned that a fourth juror has been seated, a woman, in that trial. Ron, thank you. Appreciate it. To another trial now. 4 of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers set to testify in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. And today, we heard from the first one. She spoke under the pseudonym Jane, didn't give her real name for obvious reasons, and she shared in detailed accounts that Ghislaine Maxwell, she says, was frequently in the room when Epstein would assault her. That was very emotional testimony for people in court. And it came after Epstein's pilot, Larry Vysotsky, said on the stand that Kevin Spacey, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton were just some of the high-profile passengers he saw on Epstein's plane. When it came to Maxwell herself, he said it was not unusual for her to be in the plane's cockpit. Tom Winter was there in court. He's been there, actually, really, since this trial began. And Tom, let me start with what we started this introduction with, which is that emotional testimony from one of the 4 women who accused Epstein and Maxwell of assault. There have been a lot of people who have been waiting for this moment. Can you talk about what you heard and what the reaction was like in court today?
Right, Hallie, and because of the coronavirus and the social distancing parameters have been set up in court, only a limited amount of reporters are allowed in each day, and for each session in the morning and the afternoon. I was one of the reporters selected for this afternoon, so physically in the courtroom to see this testimony. It was emotional at times. The woman identifying herself as Jane, the judge previously ruling that the 4 alleged victims in this case could testify under pseudonyms. She chose to use a pseudonym of Jane, testifying that the abuse the relationship started between Maxwell, Epstein, and Jane in the summer of 1994 while she was eating ice cream at what she described as a band camp, basically a camp in the upper Midwest for individuals who are gifted in the arts, whether it be the physical arts or in singing and music, things like that. That she met them then. She said that she lived in Palm Beach. Epstein apparently suggested, according to her testimony, that he lived there too. He asked for her number, for the mother to her the number to her mother, met with her mother and this Jane at Epstein's mansion in Palm Beach outside at the pool. Apparently she shared tea and pastries. And from there, according to her testimony, she developed a relationship with Maxwell and Epstein that eventually led to some insider kind of dirty jokes, using language I can't use in speaking with you.
Right.
And then from there, got a lot more serious with a series of abuse while she was 14, 15, and 16, according to her testimony. Talking about orgies with other women, sexual contact with Maxwell herself, and of course Jeffrey Epstein, as she testified today. Hallie.
There was also what we addressed just a second ago too. I mean, major big-time names, right? What do Kevin Spacey and Bill Clinton have in common? Well, apparently, according to this pilot, they've been on this plane, Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Can you talk about what it means that this network of celebrities was in close proximity, according to this testimony, to Epstein, to Maxwell, et cetera? How does that affect the case here?
Right, big names. It actually came up in Jane's testimony, too. She said there were several occasions where Maxwell and Epstein would name drop, according to her, that they would put some of these famous people on a cell phone. She didn't say specifically who, but they would put the names on a speakerphone and say, oh, we're talking with so-and-so as a means to impress her. She felt that sometimes that was a little bit intimidating. But this network of names that came up, look, a number of these names were public before in press reports, including by this network and public records, that we were able to obtain these logbooks that were associated with the flights and the pilot that testified today, Larry Vysotsky. But I think when you look at it, it shows that Epstein was certainly able, or had the means or the wealth, to somehow get himself into some pretty lofty circles. He had 2 former presidents, both Bill Clinton and President Trump, fly on his plane. We did see pictures from inside that plane today. Hallie, we hope to be able to share those with everybody tomorrow once those pictures become public.
Once they go into evidence. Tom Winter, we'll have you back if that happens. Thank you so much for being with us. You in the courtroom, now out reporting for us live. Appreciate it. So you probably heard about this, right? Tiger Woods, he says he is lucky to be alive after a car crash earlier this year left him very badly hurt. He's now spoken on camera publicly for the first time since that crash, sharing some pretty scary details and more on what's ahead for him. He talks about what's next for his career. We've got a live report coming up. Listen, you haven't seen Tiger Woods in a while. Neither have we, at least not until today. He's out. He's in public for the first time since that horrific car crash he was in. He's saying he is done playing pro golf full time because he's still recovering from what happened 9 months ago. Watch.
I won't have the opportunity to practice given the condition of my leg and build up. I just don't. So it's going to have to be a different way of doing it. And that's okay, and I'm at peace with that. I've made the climb enough times.
You'll probably remember this is what it looked like. That mangled piece of metal right there, that's his car that he crashed in Southern California after going more than 80 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone. Steve Patterson is with us live now. Steve, I know we're looking at all of this, not just the incident when it happened, but covering what happened today. It seems like there were some emotional moments for Tiger Woods at a couple of different points, right?
Emotional, revealing, candid. It really was a look at a man who was sort of more introspective than I think we've seen him, and for good reason. I mean, I think people forget how bad that accident was. You just showed it, but his right leg was smashed up, tibia, fibula, pins and rods in his ankle. Really had to focus on incredibly painful rehabilitation of that leg, and just the experience from that. He says he's, as you played before, lucky to be alive and lucky to have his leg. Doctors said that it wasn't necessarily 50-50, but it was darn close to them having to amputate. It was never off the table. He spoke about that and a little bit more on his mental health. We'll talk about that after this, but listen to what he said.
I'm lucky to be alive, but also still have the limb. Those are two crucial things, so I'm very, very grateful that someone upstairs was taking care of me.
Grateful, and it was somber, but it was also sort of jovial. He was joking with reporters who were in the room. Really, you could tell he was just happy to be back around the game, and I think that's the whole point of his sort of new mission.
I have to ask this, Steve, because I feel like it's a question that's out there, which was why was he going 80+ miles an hour, right, when this crash happened itself, like going back to when this actually happened in a 45-mile-an-hour zone? Was he not asked about it? Did he get asked and not answer? Like, did nobody bring that piece of it up?
So this is going to make me look bad because I just said it was a very candid conference. But when that question was asked, he basically said, yeah, you can find it in the police report. So he was, more shedding light on some of the other things that surrounded that, but wouldn't speak about it himself. And he was asked, again, several times. Part of it, though, he said he just simply forgot a lot of the details. He said that at the time, that he doesn't really remember the crash. As for what caused it or what surrounded it, again, he said it's in the police report. So
he posted this video fairly recently of him taking some swings, right? Like some full golf swings. It's not as though we're never going to see him on the golf course again, right? Like, I get that he's not going to be full-time back on the PGA Tour, but it seems like he's definitely leaving the door open, if not likely to show up somewhere.
He put it like this. He's made peace with where he's at, which is that he is probably no longer competing for the pinnacle of the sport, will likely pick and choose which tournaments he wants to proceed in and which he wants to just stay on the sidelines and enjoy his life. But that's where he's at this point, and still very much in pain, Hallie.
Steve Patterson live for us there in California covering that. Steve, thank you. Coming up here on the show, speaking of California, a possible break in the case of a mom from that state missing after attending her son's football game. LAPD now searching a landfill for evidence connected to Heidi Plank's disappearance. What investigators think they could find there. Plus, a college student dead after taking part in a frat boxing match. A lot to unpack here, like how this fight night was even allowed to happen. Zingle Esimwa has the answers for us in tonight's original. So one of Donald Trump's closest allies in the White House now pulling a bit of a backtrack and cooperating with the January 6th investigation at the Capitol. So what's up with that change for Mark Meadows, and what can we learn from him? We'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Los Angeles police are searching a California landfill for evidence connected to a missing mom. Heidi Plank disappeared in October. She was last seen on security video walking her dog in downtown LA. Now, police are looking in what they call a specific area of the landfill for human remains. Number 2, Remember Mexican drug lord El Chapo? He is in federal prison for life. Well, today we found out his wife is also going to spend some time in prison. She was sentenced to 3 years. Back in June, Emma Coronel Iceborough pleaded guilty to federal charges of helping her husband run his multi-billion-dollar drug empire. Number 3, Twitter says it's going to take down private photos and videos if they're posted without a person's consent. The company says this change will hopefully protect users from harassment and from doxing. Number 4, it is officially the end of the Atlantic hurricane season. And it was the 6th consecutive year, the 6th year in a row of activity that was more than we typically see, with 21 named tropical storms and hurricanes. 21! It was also more expensive than years before. Hurricane Ida alone caused $60 billion in damages. Number 5, a guy in Texas has been sentenced to 9 years in prison. Why? For using federal COVID relief money to buy a bunch of luxury stuff. Lee Price III bought a Lambo. He got a Ford truck. He got a Rolex. He even paid off loans on a property he owned. The Justice Department said Price got more than $1.6 million in total. A Lamborghini. There you go. Donald Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, is now, we've learned just today, apparently cooperating, at least to some degree, with that committee in Congress investigating the attack on the Capitol. Why does this matter? Why should you care? Because Mark Meadows was the former chief of staff. He was basically the right-hand man to Donald Trump, the highest profile person in Donald Trump's inner circle there, who's known to be formally cooperating. The Select Committee chairman, Benny Thompson, said not only has Meadows produced some records to the committee, but he's actually supposed to sit down for a deposition at some point soon. We don't know specifically when. Leanne Caldwell is here with us. And Leanne, this is an interesting shift because just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking here on this show about how Mark Meadows refused to show up for a deposition that had been scheduled earlier in the month, right? So what's with the change of heart?
Well, Hallie, I've been covering Mark Meadows for a very long time, since he was a freshman congressman more than a decade ago. Mark Meadows likes to walk up to that line, but not really cross it. So when the committee was stalling on if they were actually going to issue these contempt charges or referrals, and it wasn't actually happening, I had thought that maybe there was something that was in the works. And it turns out that there was, although there are a lot of caveats with what Mark Meadows' attorney says. And those caveats are that he's willing to cooperate and hand over documents that do not fall under this executive privilege claim of these close communications with the former president and his conversations with the former president. So there's still a very large bucket of things, perhaps, that Meadows is not going to share. So he's trying to delineate, kind of have it both ways, where he's like, I'm going to cooperate with the committee, but I'm not going to talk about these things over here that I think are privileged. We'll see how the committee splits that baby, if they're able to at all. Hallie.
And because it's entirely possible, Leanne, that Mark Meadows shows up for this deposition, whenever it's supposed to happen, and sits there and answers every question by saying, executive privilege, I can't answer that. Executive privilege, I can't answer that. Like, that's in the realm of possibility, right?
It is in the realm of possibility, and that's similar to what Jeffrey Clark, a former Trump administration Department of Justice official, did when he showed up before the committee a couple weeks ago. He showed up, people thought he was going to cooperate, and he cooperated not at all. He pled the Fifth, said it was executive privilege, and tomorrow the committee is going to vote on a criminal contempt referral, just like they did with Steve Bannon. And so they are moving forward with that. So what Mark Meadows did, it buys him some time, and we'll see how this progresses. It might just be what he's doing is buying time, or maybe he's actually going to cooperate.
But then simultaneously with all this, there was what we saw in a federal appeals court today, because Mark Meadows is claiming executive privilege in some of these instances. Former President Trump is also claiming executive privilege for some documents, some records from his time in the White House that this committee wants to see. And it sounds like these judges that heard these arguments today were pretty skeptical of the arguments that Mr. Trump's attorneys were laying down.
Yeah, but the witnesses, these former Trump administration officials, don't really care what the judge is saying. They are trying to hide under this broad claim of executive privilege. They're hoping that this case perhaps helps their case. If they say that they have executive privilege and they hang it on the archives case that was heard today, perhaps that sparks another lawsuit and another court challenge. So, you know, there's a lot of legalese here, and the committee's kind of in uncharted territory here. These are former administration officials, and you know, they are in the driver's seat, but also, you know, these witnesses are able to talk or not, and the committee has to deal with it.
Leanne Caldwell, live for us on the Hill. Leanne, thanks for being on. Appreciate it. We want to bring you now to today's original. a story that features some in-depth and original reporting from our team here at Hallie Jackson Now. And in this one, the Kappa Sigma frat, the fraternity at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, they're under scrutiny after one of their charity events turned deadly. Now, as far as we know, this wasn't a hazing thing, and the student didn't die from drinking too much, but there's already some finger-pointing here as it relates to safety concerns, and that's bringing up new questions about fraternity accountability. Zincle Asamoah has the story.
He was stumbling around. Something just didn't seem right.
A college student is dead after a fraternity boxing match. His death ruled a homicide, his community mourning, and a family left with questions.
Why wasn't there a professional referee? These are amateur fighters.
Nathan Valencia died of blunt force head trauma, according to the Clark County coroner. His family alleging inadequate safety precautions and no professional ref on site at a November 19th charity event hosted off campus by University of Nevada, Las Vegas frat Kappa Sigma. Valencia died just 4 days before his 21st birthday. The university president saying the school will, quote, review the incident and determine how off-campus events like these can be as safe as possible. The family saying they welcome the investigation, demanding accountability.
In one of the fights, the headgear got knocked off.
Valencia's girlfriend was at fight night.
Throughout all of the fights, people from the crowd would have to say something to the ref to stop the fight because the fight was over.
How common is the death of someone who was engaging in a boxing fight?
Very rare.
Steele is a professional referee in the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
The doctor, the ambulance, and the professional referee must be there present.
The Nevada Athletic Commission, which governs unarmed combat in the state, tells NBC it's launching an investigation. Fraternity Kappa Sigma did not immediately respond to our requests for comment. This as pressure to eliminate Greek life on campuses grows.
If we can't find a way to make these fraternity houses places that don't perpetuate interpersonal violence and sexual assault, then there's no reason to participate in these organizations.
Emanike was in a sorority at WashU in St. Louis, but joined abolish Greek life movements on campus. Her sorority voted to dissolve. Support online has grown for abolish Greek life movements, with schools like Swarthmore and Williams eliminating Greek life entirely. In D.C., Senator Sherrod Brown reintroducing the REACH Act earlier this year. The legislation in part would require hazing incidents to be reported as part of a college's annual crime report. The policy considered as debates over Greek life continue. The North American Interfraternity Conference representing frats around the country telling NBC in part moves to abolish Greek life, quote, fall short of truly dealing with campus-wide cultural challenges. In Valencia's death, no allegations of hazing have been presented. Today, the university and law enforcement investigate. Foster, in a sorority, says she's grateful for the support of the Greek life community and hopes for safer events in the future and justice for Valencia.
When people say some people are too good for this world, it's really him.
Zincle is joining us now. And Zincle, I know the family is bringing up some questions about, why there wasn't more safety, why there weren't more safety precautions in place, basically. Who do they say they want to be held accountable here?
Yeah, Hallie, we actually got a statement from them just this evening, and they're alleging it needs to be the university, the fraternity, the event space, and the referee who need to be held accountable. And they say they're willing to cooperate with the investigation to make that happen.
Zincle Asamoah, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time. We really appreciate your original reporting for us tonight. Thanks. Coming up here on the show, check out this. A woman saved a man from a burning house in Utah. And did I mention she's pregnant? Yeah, you got to see this video and hear why this good Samaritan said she sprang into action. And you know Dr. Oz, you've seen a show, you might have learned about fish oil from the guy, but now he's apparently looking to add senator to his resume. So how might that kind of run shake up a key race? We'll get into it. Barbados saying bye, Queen, to Queen Elizabeth. We're going to talk about what the Caribbean island is doing, dropping the royal as its head of state to become a republic. Are there any hard feelings across the pond about it? We're going to talk with Molly Hunter about that in a second. But first, NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day. And because you could not possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. First, from our West Coast Bureau, a pregnant woman in Utah risked her life to save a guy whose house was on fire. Look at this video here. Sarah Mon was 4.5 months along, but she didn't think twice about going up to the front of the house, which is on fire. It is on fire, and banging on the door. The guy inside was apparently fast asleep, didn't know what was going on until he woke up because he heard all the knocking. Mon says she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Pretty amazing. Officials say they still don't know why this fire started in the first place. Also out west, a woman has been detained for jumping onto a tarmac at LAX Monday night. She was apparently trying to flag down a plane that was meant for takeoff. Why? Great question. We don't know. Nobody does yet. She was taken to the hospital for minor injuries and a mental health evaluation. And from the South, some justice for an Alabama woman who was falsely accused of shoplifting. Leslie Nurse was arrested at a Walmart in Mobile in 2016 when she tried to leave with groceries she had already paid for. Even though her case was dismissed a year later, she says Walmart threatened her with lawsuits. She was awarded more than $2 million in damages. You might know Dr. Oz, right? A celebrity TV doctor. He's got a lot of titles on his resume, and now he's hoping to add candidate for senator to that list. He actually just added it. He announced his run today in an op-ed in the Washington Examiner. He went after the government's COVID response, saying he's running to, quote, help fix problems and help us heal. And this is such an interesting race, even if you don't live in Pennsylvania, even if you're not that into politics. Why? Here's why. Because this guy, Republican Senator Pat Toomey, is not running for re-election. That means there is an open seat, and this is a wide open race, right? Republicans, Democrats, Dr. Oz now targeting this place. Mark Murray is back with us here in our newsroom to talk about it all. Mark, hello.
Hi, Hallie.
So, Dr. Oz, there's a lot here, right? Because we talked about the stakes of this race. It is totally wide open on the Republican side, like much less the Democratic side, which it also is. And now you have Dr. Oz, this celebrity. People didn't really know whether he was a Democrat or Republican necessarily, although he had been interacting with Donald Trump for quite a while. He had done, you might remember that physical that he did in 2016 with Mr. Trump, who was then running for president. Now we know he's a Republican, he's running for office, and he's slamming government COVID mandates.
Yeah, and not only is he slamming government COVID mandates, to me, when I looked at that op-ed that he ended up writing, you could also take it as a criticism of Donald Trump and his stewardship of the coronavirus back in 2020. And so, in a lot of ways, what is interesting, Hallie, is that you have a Republican who's running on health and the coronavirus, which normally hasn't been the resume necessarily of a lot of Republican candidates in this Trump world.
What's interesting here, though, is that for the Republican people who are running in this race, it is widely believed that the Trump endorsement is going to be the thing that they should get, the thing that they should want. Is Dr. Oz courting that if he's also kind of going after former President Trump in this op-ed?
Well, Hallie, there were a couple of other clues that were very Trumpy in Dr. Oz's announcement. Number one, he used the term America first. He also said, I'm going to tell it like it is. Very Trumpy, but...
Or Chris Christie-ish,
right. But no one knows who's going to actually get this endorsement. And, of course, I think an endorsement gives somebody an upper hand. But previously, Trump had already endorsed another candidate, Sean Parnell, who ended up suspending his campaign. So this is all out for the open, and we'll see who ends up getting the endorsement and the Republican nomination.
And an endorsement is sometimes important because it helps with name recognition, right? It helps. Dr. Oz already has that. Do you think that kind of gives him a leg up in some instances?
Absolutely. We're talking about him and not some of the other candidates who've actually declared their candidacy.
Good point, right?
That name ID does matter.
I want to say, too, one of the reasons we're also talking about him is because there are some serious and very legitimate questions about even his medical life, right? Opposed to his, before his politician life, of whether or not he is, a fish oil salesman here.
Yeah, and that's all going to be litigated in the Republican primary. His residency, where he's actually been living in New Jersey, and all of a sudden, hey, I've been able to vote in Pennsylvania elections in the past year. That's all going to come to the fore. But Hallie, what really kind of fascinates me about this whole story is how the lines of celebrity have moved in American politics. It really wasn't too long ago that you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, who ran for governor of California, but he had actually run some education initiatives. You had Al Franken, who became a Democratic senator from Minnesota, but he wrote books on politics and was firmly engaged. Even Donald Trump was a surrogate for Mitt Romney in the 2012 presidential election. Now you have someone like Dr. Oz. No one even knew the guy was political up until this announcement. Same thing, you and I were talking about Matthew McConaughey. We also didn't know he was political. He decided not to run for governor of Texas, but we didn't even know what party he was. And so these lines of these celebrities who had engaged in politics before, now it's transformed, whereas all of a sudden they might not even engage and they're running for the United States Senate, and that's what's new.
And we'll see how that turns out for Dr. Oz. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Mark Murray.
Can't wait.
Thank you much. Appreciate it. Barbados, have you heard about this? Saying bye, Queen. As of today, the former British colony is officially a republic. They held a big party overnight. Fireworks, dancing, music. And they officially removed Queen Elizabeth as head of state. You know it was a good party because Rihanna was there. She got a pretty big honor. The prime minister declared her a national hero. Before that, she was an ambassador for Barbados. Here's what she had to say about that.
This is a day that I would never, ever forget. It's also a day that I never saw coming.
So you would think, are there hard feelings from the British royal family? Not really. Prince Charles went there to celebrate with everybody else. Molly Hunter is here with us now with more on what this change means for the future of the country and the Commonwealth. Here's her reporting.
There were celebrations last night when, at the stroke of midnight, Barbados opened a new chapter, becoming an independent republic,
a parliamentary republic,
and removing Queen Elizabeth as their head of state. An emotional moment for the royal family.
I shall always consider myself a friend of Barbados.
The Commonwealth is very, very dear to the royal family. It was on the Queen's 21st birthday that she made really her most important, earliest speech about the Commonwealth.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Just 2 years later, in 1949, the modern Commonwealth, built as a free, equal, and voluntary association of nations, was born.
The Commonwealth has been one of the Queen's greatest achievements. 2.5 billion people, a third of the world's population, is in the Commonwealth.
The Commonwealth has 54 members. 16 of them were under the Commonwealth realm, with the Queen as their constitutional monarch, including Barbados.
Today, 1,200 school children came to a field outside Bridgetown to meet their Queen.
But now things are changing.
The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind.
A complex relationship clouded by slavery and colonialism, today giving way to a brighter future.
It will be marked on the pages of our history as a significant step in our political evolution.
Sandra Mason, until today, the governor representing Her Majesty the Queen, has been sworn into a brand new Barbadian role.
So help me God.
Dame Sandra Mason will be our first president, which is monumental. She's now representing the people rather than the British monarchy.
Celebrating this historic day with the Barbadians is none other than Britain's future king, Prince Charles.
It was important to me that I should join you to reaffirm those things which do not change. For example, that the close and trusted partnership between Barbados and the United Kingdom.
The real hope is he's there, he's celebrating them becoming a republic. Maybe they'll stay in the Commonwealth.
Let me see some hands in the air.
While no longer under the Commonwealth realm, for many Barbadians, there's no maybe.
Barbados is definitely committed to remaining within the Commonwealth.
But the Commonwealth realm is synonymous with the Queen. Can it ever be the same without her?
Are we going to have a problem with some nations becoming more inclined to republicanism after the Queen is no longer with us because of perhaps dissatisfaction with Prince Charles? Well, yes, maybe.
For now, the future king can only hope this royal charm offensive will be the lasting jewel in the Commonwealth crown.
Molly Hunter is with us now live. Molly, I was hoping you were going to be still in Barbados for us. I know you're not. But talk to me about this. It's super interesting. You've got this very important symbolically, but functionally, what does this actually do now that there's a president and they've made this decision to bring down this symbol of the British monarchy?
Right, just the Barbadian weather here outside of Buckingham Palace. I know. Look, short answer, not that much. Functionally, look, the presidential duties will be very, very similar to the duties of the governor general. So this is really an emotional, symbolic, historical decision, much more than a practical one. Hallie?
We heard there in your piece that the Commonwealth realm is one and the same with Queen Elizabeth, right? When she will eventually move on to the next, she will pass away. Prince Charles will take up leadership. Do you think at that point you're going to see more places other than Barbados, do this same kind of thing and try to cut ties with the monarchy?
Yeah, that's certainly what experts are saying, that it is likely. And Barbados is right there paving the way, of course, while she's still alive. But look, most of the world, most of the Commonwealth has only ever known a Queen Elizabeth. So when Charles takes over, it's going to be this seismic shift and really a moment, Hallie, for a lot of these countries to say, what do we want for our future? Right. Is this right for us? Hallie?
Next time you come on, Molly, we're going to fly you down to Barbados. We just think you deserve it because we appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on and for bringing us that great reporting. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, you down with NFTs? Plenty of people are, and they are spending millions on these one-of-a-kind digital things. Now Spider-Man wants in on the action. Callan Rosenblatt joins us after the break to explain why. You might have heard about this. Movie theater chain AMC taking a dive into the world of NFTs. It's partnering with Sony to offer 86,000 of these NFTs to people who ordered advance tickets for the opening of Spider-Man: No Way Home, that new movie that comes out in a couple weeks. And listen, AMC, Sony, they're not the only ones really getting into this NFT thing. A lot of big companies are moving towards them as they go more mainstream. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade made some of its balloons and archival content into NFTs. You could buy those. Stars like Steve Aoki, Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher are making their own shows using NFTs. We just showed Martha Stewart. She's getting in on the NFT game, too. And Callan Rosenblatt is here to explain how we got here. Callan, I have to just start in like 2 sentences or less. You have to explain to people what an NFT is. Go.
Okay, so an NFT is a non-fungible token. And really, to break it down in the most simple form possible, it's basically a certificate of authenticity that you own whatever image is being sold as an NFT. So it's like I could go into a lot of detail, but I won't. I will just say it's basically a certificate of authenticity that you own this entity, but it's not a copyright. So just like if you own the Mona Lisa, there could still be prints and other images of the Mona Lisa. That's essentially what an NFT is. It's like owning that piece of work of art, but you don't own the rights to the piece of work.
But so there are plenty of people who love this, right? Who do see this as like the future of where art is going as it relates to technology, who want these NFTs because they want to own this like piece of basically, the piece of the internet, if you will, this like digital item. And it can be a real gold mine, right? For people who are celebrities, for people who want to make a ton of money, for big companies too, who are cashing in on this.
Absolutely. And even memes. I mean, there is this, ideology that like memes, it's really hard to make money off of them, right? Because they're like this sort of intangible piece of digital art. Well, NFTs are sort of flipping that on its head and saying, you know what? Do you want to own this super rare meme or everybody's favorite meme or the meme of the moment? Well, you can. You can actually purchase it as an NFT. One example is Doge, which is like that cute Shiba Inu who looks like kind of confused. That meme we reported on earlier this year sold for $4 million.
Yeah.
Again, it's like if you want to own
$4 million real dollars,
real
money.
Real dollars. So it sells for the cryptocurrency Ethereum, but that's translated into like regular, normal, everyday currency.
Right. And meme makers, to people who are in these memes, can finally make some money off of them, too, which is a huge thing. So to explain this to like an average, like somebody who's watching who maybe isn't into this, let's talk about how it works. If you and I were to take a picture right now, right? Like if we screen grab this shot, like make a face, and we're going to sell it, could we sell it as an NFT? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, we totally could. What we would have to do is we'd have to set up sort of a digital wallet so that we can receive as well as pay Ethereum, which again is that currency. You're going to need a little bit of Ethereum in your wallet, which you could buy with your normal money. That's going to pay for like the fees to sort of mint this NFT. You're going to upload it to one of these auction sites. Again, you're certifying that this is an image that you and I own, Hallie, and that we want to sell. You can choose to either say this is one of a kind or sort of like a run of NFTs, sort of like if you were to have a collector's item and it's one of a certain number of items. And then you can list it to auction and people can bid on it. I don't know how much people would want an image of my face, but maybe they want Doge or they want, an image of Spider-Man.
Don't know your value, girl. Don't undersell yourself. Callan Rosenblatt, thank you so much for breaking it down. I appreciate you being with us. That's it for this hour. We're out of time. More for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.